Welcome to Hope Natural Health, the podcast inspiring you to be your best version. Join me, your host, Dr. Erin, naturopathic doctor, dog mom, cancer survivor, and girl boss weekly as we discuss all things health, hormones, and happiness with a little side of this thing called life. We are back for another fresh episode. Last week, though, we discussed the differences between endometriosis and adenomyosis. But this week, I have a special guest here, Tracy Slepcevic. She is a best-selling author, certified integrative health practitioner, speaker, Air Force veteran, and the founder of Pur Health, LLC. She is educated in the field of complementary and alternative medicine and has dedicated over 15 years to researching various treatments and therapies for individuals with Autism Spectrum Disorder. Over the years, she has worked with various doctors, scientists, advocates, and researchers, and has made it her mission to educate families on the importance of living a healthy lifestyle. So I am super excited for her to be here so we can dive into Autism Spectrum Disorder, and welcome to the show, Tracy.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. So before we dive into, some facts about autism, why don't you tell me a little bit more about your background and how you really developed this passion for, educating around autism?
So I am an autism mom. And many years ago, when my son was diagnosed with autism, I didn't know what to do. And even before then, as I was trying to figure out what was going on, because in my day, my idea of autism was Dustin Hoffman's character in The Rain Man. So that wasn't clearly how I saw my son. So nothing was kind of clicking, but there was something wrong. And then, when I found out that Noah was diagnosed with autism, a very dear friend of mine who's a naturopathic doctor told me, Noah will be fine. And I want you to go home and I want you to do your research because doctors are making great strides with biomedical intervention. Now, this was like 2008, and I had no idea what biomedical intervention was. I was going to school for psychology at the time. I had a background in nutrition, but I'm like, what is this biomedical stuff? So I sucked the tears back up into my eyes and I went home and I got to work. And thus began my journey to getting my PhD in how to heal my kid like really fast overnight.
That's amazing. So what did you do to heal him? Tell us a little bit more about your research in the medicine.
So biomedical intervention is addressing the underlying biological issues that are going on in the body. Now, you can have a genetic predisposition for something, but it's going to take some sort of environmental factor to trigger it. You got glyphosate in food. You've got, they're raining all kinds of toxins on us these days. They're in our clothes, they're in our water, our food, everything genetically modified, all kinds of stuff. Right. So the combination of these two things are impacting our children. And so you got to get to the underlying issues. So initially, I had read so many books and I kept hearing gluten-free, dairy-free. So I got on the gluten-free, dairy-free bandwagon. So I can say I've been gluten-free since before gluten-free was cool. Right? And from there, my naturopath also assisted me in finding back then what we called DAN doctors. They followed a Defeat Autism Now protocol. And that protocol, again, was to address underlying conditions associated with autism and, other neurological disorders as well. So in this process, I was just working on the gut. So I had a heads up, and Noah was starting to talk. So here was a child who had poor motor function. He had no speech. He would just scream and tantrum. But all of a sudden, I started getting words. And I'm like, wow, this stuff's really working. And so when I got to see the doctor, she ran the whole battery of tests. She did blood, urine, fecal. And because Noah was an ear infection baby and he was on so many
Mm.
antibiotics in his childhood, he developed a lot of yeast in the gut. So this created leaky gut. And I'm sure you know a lot about leaky gut, but
Mm-hmm.
in layman terms, for parents who don't understand, your intestinal lining is lined with these epithelial cells. And what the job of those epithelial cells are to pull in all the vitamins and the nutrients and all the good stuff that we eat
Mm-hmm.
and keep out the bad and to get rid of the rest is waste. But when we have, foods that we have an intolerance to, or that are full of chemicals that our body is not used to, then what happens is it starts to deaden those epithelial cells and it'll create gaps or what they call junctures in in the gut, and that's called leaky gut. So
Mm-hmm.
then all those big food particles and all the waste gets through into the bloodstream and just kind of wreaks havoc on the
Mm-hmm.
body, but also the brain. So you have a lot of these kids that are, that have self-injurious behavior because they have a very high pain tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
They're leaning over chairs because their tummies hurt.
Mm.
So I really say it begins in the gut. It
Mm-hmm.
all begins in the gut. Our gut is connected to our brain via our nervous system. So imagine that whatever's going on in there, and we all got a little something going on, um, that it's going to affect our brain in a way, brain fog, behavioral disorders. And then I also tell parents, if you have a child with severe behavioral disorders, one of the main underlying conditions for tics, Tourette's, autism, oppositional defiance disorder is PANDAS. PANDAS is
Mm-hmm.
pediatric autoimmune neuropsychotrophic disorder associated with streptococcus. I know it's a mouthful,
Why it's called
but
pandas.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but strep levels. So high strep levels can cause inflammation on the brain and it
Mm-hmm.
can cause severe regression. And I never even really realized until recently when I was talking to Dr. Pierre Corey that his daughter almost died from pandas. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, I didn't realize that it's a life-threatening disorder. Now, I know my kid had been through so many different treatments to treat pandas and reoccurring pandas. And even to this day that he's 18 years old and he's fully functioning, we still try to keep those strep levels down. And we're both carriers of strep, so we all always got to keep that strep at bay.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's so many different things out there. Number one is you are what you eat. If you're shoving toxic food into your body and your liver is bombarded with toxins and it's overloaded, then it's not doing its job properly. And your
Mm-hmm.
liver is your second brain. And I can't stress this to people, parents, individuals enough that that how important it is for our liver to function well.
Mm-hmm.
So doing a liver detox like at least once a year, twice, preferably twice a year. And making sure that you do, parasite cleanses and stuff like that. You could do that simply with food grade diatomaceous earth, you know,
Mm-hmm.
once a day mixed with water or juice or whatever. And, really just clean out the intestines.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many different things out there. And what I wanted when I wrote my book, what I wanted for parents was one, I wanted to give them hope and
Mm-hmm.
inspiration. I have a fully functioning child today. He's 18. He drives, he goes to college, he goes to his own doctor's appointments now. He just told me he wants to travel to the UK next summer all by himself, and I'm really struggling with that one. But I got him to a functioning state. So when I said a mother's journey in healing her son with autism, it wasn't that I cured or I changed him.
Mm-hmm.
I I healed those underlying conditions to get him to a functioning state as to where he could live a full life. And that was my hope for him. So I tell my story of hope and inspiration and little bit of trials and tribulations along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I go on to tell parents like a little bit of a guidebook. What do you do if you even think
Yeah.
your child could have autism? And those are all the questions that I asked myself over and over. And then moving into what are your state resources? Where do you go for an evaluation prior to the age of 3, after the age of 3?
Mm-hmm.
What is available to a parent? What are some great organizations that you can turn to for assistance? And what are some good books that I read back then that
Mm-hmm.
helped me along the way? Um, and so, and then the third part is all about, the biomedical intervention that I used in some additional treatments and therapies that are benefiting kids today, like the non-speakers of the world. Spelling to Communicate has really blown up in the
Mm-hmm.
industry with the Spellers documentary. And so in all of this, I put it all in a book for a parent, but also for an individual. As I was healing my son, I was healing myself.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely had my own aches and pains, joint pain, migraines. You were just talking about your previous episode. I've had endometriosis,
Mm-hmm.
polycystic ovarian syndrome. I've had 15 plus surgeries in my lifetime. I have definitely been through the ringer. But as I was healing my son, I realized this isn't just for individuals or kids with autism. This is
Mm-hmm.
just for people.
Yeah.
Because we all have some underlying things going on. We live in
Mm-hmm.
a toxic world, and that's just a fact. So, um, once the book got out and everything started to do well, I decided that the best thing to do was to create an event to teach all these parents, caregivers, doctors, all of them on how to implement this type of treatment therapy and to bring a community of parents together and let them know they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
That's most important to me. So I created the Autism Health Summit, and February 2nd and 3rd of 2024, I'll be doing my first conference in San Antonio, Texas, which I'm super excited about. Many years ago, I used to be an event coordinator, and then I worked for Hyatt Hotels for many years. So it's my wheelhouse, and I'm happy to be back in it. And doing an autism event was always like my dream event. And there's so many wonderful things happening. My ebook or my audible for my book will be coming out probably in a couple weeks. Will be released on Amazon, so that's exciting. I can tell you that was one of the hardest things I ever had to do, actually, because it's it's a labor of love
Mm-hmm.
to hold those emotions as I'm trying to speak them and do it
Mm-hmm.
justice. But it's all done, and I'm proud of that as well.
Well, that is amazing. I really appreciate everything you've done for everyone else because it's such an important topic and it's a very common disorder. So let's dive into a little bit of facts and statistics around autism. So, do you know how many children are diagnosed yearly? And then also, is it more prevalent in the US than it is in other countries? I threw that one in there because I just thought about it because I know how toxic our environment is. And I know that it's not as toxic in other countries as it is here.
So, Autism Now is the CDC released their data, which they go based on 8-year-olds. They
Okay.
don't do a wide range of people. So if you have a child that is diagnosed late in life or that wasn't diagnosed at all, they're not part of those numbers.
Mm.
And so the new numbers are 1 in 36 kids with autism. So experts are saying that in with this growing rate, By 2030, it's possible that autism is going to be 1 in 2 children. So 50% of children will be diagnosed with autism. Is it more prevalent here in the United States? Yes, we do have higher numbers, but you also have to realize Europe and other countries have higher standards in regards to food and chemicals. And so they ban a lot of chemicals and byproducts, and they don't allow it to be sprayed on their food or anything. The United States operates a little differently. And, so it's very much a toxic, world and country that we're living in. But for the most part, we do have much higher numbers here.
It's crazy. It's just more reason why we need to really advocate for, our crops and chemicals. And it's just insane how much we're exposed to. So that leads me to, I know you said, the underlying causes as such as like environmental triggers and foods and such. Are there any other predispositions to autism?
So if you have, let's say, MTHFR, so that means your body can't methylate properly. When your body doesn't methylate properly, it doesn't give rid of toxins. So imagine if toxins are being poured into your body, no matter what the method is, and there's not a way to expel them, then, having a genetic predisposition, the HFR, and you can have one gene or you can have both genes coming from both parents. So my son and I both have an MTHFR. Mitochondrial disorder. In mitochondria is the energy in our cells. But it was shown in a scientific study that if a child has mitochondrial disorder, if they're diagnosed with mitochondrial disorder, and they do, let's say, the normal V schedule, right? For pediatrics, the chances of them regressing into a state of autism is 80%. It's very high. So, those neurotoxins that the preservatives that are in things, their little bodies can't fight them off. So can they be tested prior to ever, doing certain things for these children? Yes, they can. You can check for genetic predispositions, autoimmune disorders, all kinds of things. Kids at a very young age are getting thyroid conditions. So my son was diagnosed very young with a thyroid condition. That's another autoimmune disorder. So there's a number of things, but I do believe that genetics are a piece of it. So you can have a genetic predisposition for anything, cancer, Alzheimer's, whatever, but it's not going to be until there's that environmental factor that triggers that gene to activate that illness. So it is a combination of the two. And I have a lot of scientists that are coming to the conference that have written books on the combination of those two things that trigger, autism. I can only say it in, layman terms or mommy terms, as I say it sometimes, because I don't have a doctorate's degree. I'm not a scientist. And a lot of times when I talk to these scientists, I'm like, okay. Do you have an easier way of describing it? So a lot of times to people, I really try to describe it as clear as I possibly can as to where I would think that they have zero education in nutrition, the body, and how it works, all of it. So that's like my main number one thing, is to really educate people to a healthy lifestyle. Now, I like focusing on individuals with underlying conditions and children with neurological conditions, right? That's my wheelhouse, because the person who wants to lose weight or whatever, most likely, the percentage is really high that they're going to fall off their wagon. But if you ask me to write up a meal plan or coach somebody on how to heal their body from whatever's ailing them, that is like my passion. That's my wheelhouse, and that's what I know. And I've done such a great job for so many people, of all ages, from very young to very old. The book was written so that I didn't have to repeat myself to all the parents that I was mentoring.
Yeah.
That they could just have like a guidebook of information. Here, just read this. Here are some things to start with, and it's all shoved into one book. And that was, I didn't go deep into my story. I told the little pieces that I felt were important to inspire them. And, from there, I just educated.
Yeah. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Safe to say that, that popular saying, genetics load the gun, environment pulls the trigger, like very,
Yes.
very, very relevant to this topic, correct?
Yes.
And then two, I'm thinking of those, most of my audience are women, and most of them are moms or maybe inspiring moms. What would be, I kind of know the answer, but I want to hear it from you. What would be your best advice for someone that's wanting to start a family, that knows that, autism is on their brains and they really want to try and avoid, raising a child with autism? Like, what would be your best advice for them?
Okay, so my best advice is not going to be able to go up on YouTube or Facebook. So
Okay.
I want people to I just want people just to imagine it.
Got it. I got it.
Because I watched my son grow and meet all his milestones. And then at a certain point in time, I watched him lose it all. I watched him lose his speech, his motor skills, cognitive
Okay.
function,
Yeah.
and went into what I call like a fog. And he was like a little space cadet walking around, and he couldn't speak and he couldn't communicate, and he was frustrated, and he'd cry and he'd scream, and he got really, really sick at first for a long time. So he was really sick, broke out in a full body rash and a fever for over a week. And a pediatrician that was just like, oh, all this is normal. So this is what I want to tell new moms or women who want to be moms. Trust your gut intuition. Don't believe anything I say, and don't Google anything. Trust your gut intuition, because in my eyes, that's God speaking to you. We have that motherly instinct, right? That innate knowing of what's best for our family, for our children. And so I say, trust it. Do your research. There's so many books out there, not just my book. There's many wonderful scientists and doctors, writing truth. And I say, just be cautious. That's it. Be
Yeah.
cautious. When I wrote my book, I read well over 100 PubMed studies. Everything I published in my book is backed up by science somehow. And because I'm not a doctor, I'm educated in alternative medicine, but I am not a doctor. So I had to make sure that they had the resources to go to, that they can look it up.
Yeah.
It's in the reference. But there's so much more out there.
Yeah.
There's great books, great authors, great doctors fighting the good fight, and, to keep our kids safe and our world clean. And I think that's just really important. So the number one thing is to just really, really just trust that you know what's best for your child, not that pediatrician that is
Right.
like, it's all normal. And if you're worried about, oh, well, I have to take my child in for well baby visits. Well baby visits were designed for one thing and one thing only. We didn't go for well baby visits when I was a child, and I turned out just fine. So
Yeah.
I just say put two and two together,
Yep.
and you can formulate your own opinion. But that's all I'm going to say on that.
I know. I wish, hopefully, one day we can get to a place where we can openly discuss these very controversial things. I mean, I picked up what you were laying down, so I hope everyone else did. But I did want to point out, too, that PubMed, she alluded to that. That is a public source. Anyone can go on PubMed.gov and type in autism and
Yeah.
genetics, autism and gluten, like
Yeah.
autism and whatever. You can do period pain and I don't know, endometriosis.
Yeah.
You can search anything you want on there. It's a public resource, and that's all.
Mitochondrial
Yeah,
dysfunction,
anything.
MTHFR and autism, all these different
Yep.
resources on PubMed, and
Yep.
they're scientific studies that are published, and this
Hmm.
is what keeps us, moms and doctors and therapists and scientists and activists and
Yep.
everybody from getting schooled, because I could say it's a study.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it's been studied.
Google Scholar's another good one. But I mean, anytime any professional makes a presentation, like most of the resources are from PubMed or the American Journal of whatever. So, I mean, just do your research and don't believe the first article you read either. Like, do multiple, just as she said. And I think that goes for everything nowadays, not just, with autism. It's anything that you just are curious about. I think, for example, the big topic nowadays is the GLP-1s, semaglutide and the Wegovy and all of that. Like you can find all that information on PubMed and do your own research and see if it's right for you. So very good advice. I'm sure we could talk about this for days because there's so many questions I have about it. We will make sure we link your conference link and your book in the show notes at warriormom.org. So that will be all in the notes. But we'll wrap this up with one question that I ask all of my podcast guests. It's another kind of advice or tip, but it could be anything. So what would be your best or favorite health tip that you can share with the audience?
If you can pick it, pluck it, grow it, skin it, fish for it, you can eat it.
Oh, I love that.
Right? It's
Yeah.
like, go back to an old way of eating. If God put it on this earth, and your body is made to take it and digest
Yeah.
it, and it's healthy for you.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that. Is there anything that we missed, Tracy, that you wanted to share?
No, I always say for the autism parents out there, just have faith, trust the process. My son gave me purpose. He truly did. I
Yeah.
I'm so proud of him and where he's at today. And then for those parents out there, that are looking to have children, just love your children, hold them close, and teach them, talk to them.
Yeah.
Always be the birdie in their ear, because there are so many other birdies out there.
Yeah.
So protect your kids.
Awesome. Such great advice. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Tracy, and sharing your story. It's very inspiring, and I love the work that you're doing, to advocate for autism and hopefully, make it less of a statistic than it is. So we will wrap up this episode, but I want to let you know that this is the last live recorded episode for 2023. We will be playing two replays for the next 2 weeks to wrap out 2023. And I'm so excited to see everyone in 2024 for some brand new episodes. So have a wonderful holiday, everyone, and we'll see you again next year.